Hey, what is going on, guys? My name is Justin, but you can call me J-Swag, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Talk with Swag. So today's episode is going to be focused solely on the topic of professional wrestling. So if that does not interest you, I suggest you go ahead and tune out of this episode. But if you want to stick around, learn a few things, because there will be a little educational section of this podcast. If you want to stick around and learn some things and hear my opinion on some things, then stick around, because basically this episode, I'm going to be mainly talking about how and why I first became a fan of professional wrestling and why I still am to this day as a 24-year-old. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So we're actually going to start this episode off with a little bit of an educational section because there's probably going to be some terms that I'm going to be using throughout the podcast that is going to be important that you guys know and understand, so I don't have to keep explaining it. And even if I don't use them, it's also just cool, I think, to learn some new things about a sport that you probably don't know much about, if I had to guess. So just basically a few terms that I think are important to know. One of the biggest ones is kayfabe. And kayfabe is basically, to relate it to a different field, would be like your character in acting, in movies or TV or theater or whatnot. So basically, when someone is staying in character, they're keeping kayfabe. So actually, there's a phrase called "kayfabe is dead," basically, which came about when social media really got big and a lot of professional wrestlers were joining Twitter, most specifically, and basically they were quote unquote breaking kayfabe by, they were not acting and, tweeting as their character. So that actually leads to two other terms, which is a baby face, shortened to just face, and heel. And baby faces are the good guys and the heels are the bad guys, very simply put. So, a heel would break kayfabe if on Twitter, he's responding to a fan in a very positive way and, saying, hey, so glad you guys could come out to the show tonight. Really like seeing all you guys there. Like, it means a lot. Like, I love this business and, hope to see you guys out at the next show. I love Toronto. That would be called breaking kayfabe. That's what a face would do. That's what the good guys would do. The bad guy, if he was keeping kayfabe, would be, he'd say, what a great show. I saved it tonight from being total crap. Too bad Toronto as a city is horrible, and I hope we never have to come through here again. But, social media, a lot of people like to be themselves on social media, so they'll break kayfabe. So a lot of people say that kayfabe is dead now because it's only really alive the 5 hours a week that they're on live TV, and outside of that, it's kind of dead. So those are a couple terms. Another couple terms that kind of fit right into that also are work and shoot. Work, if something is a work, that means it's in kayfabe and it's for the business. It's in character. It's not real. It's fake. It's scripted. Blah blah blah. And shoot means that it's very honest and real. So the most times you'll hear these terms used is when wrestlers will give interviews, and most often they'll quote it as, saying this is a shoot interview, which means it's not in character. It's just a very real interview with that actual person. So, for instance, there's a professional wrestler whose kayfabe name is Bray Wyatt, and he's this very ethereal and almost kind of like voodoo kind of guy. He reminds you of someone who's, like a voodoo king in New Orleans, basically. Very ethereal character, talks in prophecies and whatnot. And he did a shoot interview as himself, as Wyndham Rotunda. And it was, I find these very interesting because I like to see who these people are in real life just as another guy. And so he, just gave a shoot interview that I watched one time, and he just talked very honestly and openly and transparently about his character and how he kind of came up with it and workshopped it with some of the higher ups and all that stuff. But yeah, so all that to say, there's shoot and work. And these will also come up a lot when there's promos, which I'm assuming you guys know. Promo is short for promotion, which is basically a promo in professional wrestling is when, one or more people will just be in the middle of the ring with a mic just delivering a promo, a speech, whatever you want to call it. And actually earlier this week on Monday Night Raw, there was a very shoot promo that was given or delivered, I guess you could say, on Monday Night Raw between John Cena and Roman Reigns. And it's actually been very talked about this week because a lot of people thought it was shoot and that it wasn't scripted at all. And that it was just very real because they were taking a lot of real jabs at each other. But it was, for those who are interested, it was completely worked. It was 100% scripted, but they just used some real life jabs at each other in the script to make it seem more real, make people question it more, and be like, oh my gosh, these guys actually hate each other. Outside of that, there's not really too many other terms that I know that are pretty wrestling specific, but if I think of them, I'll let you know after I use them. But yeah, so basically all that to say, I'm going to be talking about basically just why I first started watching wrestling, when I started watching it, why I kept watching it, why I keep watching it now, because I do a lot of times get made fun of for it, or not specifically made fun of for it, but I'd say the biggest thing that I get when I either tell people that I watch professional wrestling and enjoy it, or when people find out that I watch professional wrestling, the main question I always get asked, which is going to be the title of this podcast, is, it's fake, right? And it's a question that I've come to hate. It's really annoying as a professional wrestling fan. I think I speak for a lot of people. When this question gets asked, it's not only kind of offensive, but it's also just dumb. And let me explain this, because I'm not calling these people dumb. I'm just saying I think the question's a little loaded, if that makes sense. So let me answer it by saying this, that yes, I know that it's quote unquote fake, but it's scripted. A lot of everything is scripted. A lot of it, though, a lot of the matches are called on the fly, in the ring, which I think is cool because it gives it a very live and unanticipated, or anticipated, I guess. Well, I don't really know, but it just gives it that feel of it's still happening. It's not just something that's been so well rehearsed for hours before, because these guys are performing every single night. That's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't know, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, so yes, I know that it's fake. I know that a lot of the punches that they throw aren't very real, but I do know also that the steel chair shots to the head are very real. I know that getting thrown 17 feet off of a steel cage onto a table is very real. Even if there's a mat underneath it, it's still falling 17 feet onto your back onto a mat. I know that having your tooth go through your lip and getting lodged in your nose is also very real. There are real and fake aspects to it. I totally understand that. I know that when they punch them, a lot of times they're not actually really hitting them, or when they're elbowing them, they're kind of hitting them more with their forearm. But the response that I always have to this question or statement, whatever you want to call it, is, okay, but you understand that pretty much every single show or movie you watch is also fake, right? It's fake in the exact same sense that anything else you watch is fake. And so to me, it kind of just, because, they kind of portray it as being real, it gets questioned a lot of it's not real though, right? I would never respond to my friends when they're talking about Game of Thrones. I'm not going to say, well, yeah, but that's fake, right? Those aren't real dragons. her name's not actually Daenerys or whatever it is. I don't watch that show, but it's just frustrating to me because it's like pretty much everything you watch on TV is fake, especially the news. But everything like that you watch is fake. Like The Office, it's fake. Michael Scott is not a real person. It's Steve Carell portraying a character, and all of his lines are scripted. But you laughed at them, but they're scripted. But it's fake. You know that, right? And so to me, it kind of just goes in this circle of like, yes, I know it's fake, but it's still entertaining to me, though. And I can totally understand that it's not entertaining to you. Like the same that, to me, Jersey Shore is not entertaining to me. The Big Bang Theory is not funny to me. But I think The Office is funny. I think Peaky Blinders is one of the best shows out there. I think professional wrestling is entertaining to me. And so I guess going into that part of why I still watch it, we'll kind of work our way backwards. One of the reasons I still watch it is because it's entertaining, and the main thing is because of the stories that you follow. And while in this day and age with this everything going on with it being TV PG now as opposed to being TV 14, so they've had to scale back a lot on just everything, whether it be just like mostly like the actual violence, but the writing too, and not necessarily that there's not just like curse words and boobs in your face every 5 minutes like in the Attitude Era in the early 2000s, but I mean like just like the edginess of it, and that was when it really felt very real. And a lot of times they gave some of these workers more freedom to write their own promos or to just go out there unscripted and say what they wanted because they honestly had more trust and faith in them too. But it's the storylines of you having a favorite wrestler and following their character development and following their story. One of the biggest ones in the past few years, which I don't know, some of you who are casual fans will have probably heard of him, but his name is Daniel Bryan. And he was this guy who worked on the independent scene for a while. He was really good, considered one of the best, finally signed with WWE, had probably 4 years in the company before he finally started really getting a big push. And that's actually another term. If you don't know, a push is kind of just when they start writing them to do better and better, and they kind of just get behind that character and make them look better and better and give them championship opportunities or even have them win the championship. So he was starting to finally get a main event push, and he was this underdog, and he kept losing, and the kayfabe authority figures always against him and saying he's a B-plus player, you'll never be a main eventer, and they don't want him to main event, blah, blah, blah. And then finally at WrestleMania, which is their Super Bowl, he won the World Championship, and it was this amazing event. I honestly would recommend you pause this podcast right now and search YouTube for it because the crowd just goes wild. And that's another term. They popped. And a pop is when the crowd just, pops and they go crazy and they all cheer and it gets a big, huge reaction. And the crowd popped like I haven't heard it in a long time when he won the championship. But it's things like that where you follow the storylines because if they're doing it correctly, they suck you in and you want to tune in the next week to see what happens. And with good writing, with any show, like a Game of Thrones, which is considered, one of the best shows on TV right now, or even like a comedy show like The Office. Yes, I'm going to reference that show a lot. It's my favorite show, so get over it. They still have these storylines or these jokes or these characters that you invest in and you start to really like them, that you want to come back and follow more and see what happens to them and their character. Will Pam and Jim ever start dating? And then they do. And then will they ever get married? And then they do. And then they have a kid and blah, blah, blah. And it's the same thing of, will Daniel Bryan finally get his shot? Will he win this match to make him a number one contender? Will he win his match earlier in WrestleMania to then get to fight the champion? And then he wins, and you keep coming back to see more and to find out more of what happens. And that's just what television is and entertainment is at the very core of what it is you're sitting there either A, to be distracted, or B, to be entertained. And so for me, professional wrestling is one of those things, just the same as sports is. I love basketball. I tune in every, game for my favorite team that I can because I want to see how they do. Did they play better than last game? Will this player's, shooting streak continue? Will he continue to play really well? Will this team keep winning? It's just general definition of entertainment. You enjoy it. You either get a laugh out of it or it gets your blood rushing, or you just want to see what happens next because it's good quality writing. So I'd say that's probably the main reason of why I still watch wrestling to this day, even though I know it's scripted and I know that they're not always really hitting each other. It's entertaining to me. And at the core, when you're watching any television show, it's to be entertained. And this show, professional wrestling, accomplishes that for me and for a lot of people. And I just think it's kind of sad that it kind of gets a bad rap because it's kind of, it's a quote-unquote fake sport pretending to be real. And which I can understand, but I think that's just taking it too seriously because, you don't see, you never heard Hulk Hogan saying, I'm a better athlete than Michael Jordan. Like, I can beat him one-on-one. Or, you never saw him, getting all this crazy amounts of money and sponsorship deals, which is another thing because this actually leads into what I was trying to say earlier with, they're not signing these 5-year, $257 million deals, making $48 million every year and making like $50,000 a game or whatever. It's the highest paid wrestlers are making probably $8 to $9 million a year, and that's 5 of them. And then the rest are under, $1 million a year, getting, still getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they are all contracted workers. So they have to pay for their own food, they have to pay for their flights, they have to pay for their hotels. They get paid, when they show up and wrestle their match, but pretty much everything else they have to pay for. Save for, I think, when they do international tours, I think the company pays for their flights to those countries. But, when you're going from LA to Sacramento to Portland to, Yakima, Washington, you're having to figure out your travel to get there. And a lot of times they'll have a bunch of guys will be carpool buddies and they'll drive together and they'll be driving buddies and they rent a car and they have to pay for that and they have to pay for their hotel that they stay in that night. Or if, they're wanting to get a tour bus, they have to pay for that. So it's not, this very lavish and extravagant lifestyle that they live. I mean, yes, they are still making a ton of money, but, they don't get all the perks like a basketball player does, first of all, with the multi-million-dollar per year deals. But all those guys get their food taken care of. They have all their flights get taken care of. Their hotels get taken care of. They have a lot of perks. But yeah, and they also, they have the shows on Monday and Tuesday nights that are live. And then a lot of people think they just get the rest of the week off. But they're doing live shows every single night. So the guys on the roster for Monday Night Raw will do the show on Monday night and then have a live show Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and most times Sunday night as well. So they're usually working, I'd say, 5 to 6 days a week, every single week. And when they have that time off, they then try to fly back home, spend, 24 hours, 36 hours with their family, with their wives, husbands, their kids, their friends. And a couple of them also are international too. So I was actually listening to a podcast with this guy who's originally from Sweden or Switzerland, one of those. I always get those confused. And he, has been home to his home country with his family, I think 3 times since he's been with the company. He's been with them for 6 or 7 years. So it's tough for them, and I'm not, trying to defend them or anything, but I think they often get a bad rap and people think that they're not, they just don't take them very seriously. And I feel like while it's not, super. How do I say this? Yes, I know it. Like it's scripted and they're not always hitting each other, but it's still a full-time job that they're having to work their butts off to even get to that point of being in the WWE, because you don't just start training and then go to the WWE. And there's also no guarantee of kind of having an opportunity like a college or developmental league. Like they kind of just have to go to the independents where they're making no money at all and having a side job, and then hopefully get noticed, and then they can sign a developmental contract with WWE, and then hopefully get called up to the main roster. So it's definitely a process to get there, and then it's still a lot of work once you are there. But yeah, I guess kind of just that's something that I always think about, that I'm not sure if other people who don't really pay attention to professional wrestling know or not. But yeah, so let's go back then to my roots of how I started watching wrestling and, what I first got that from. And it was actually, I'm trying to think, I know I was in elementary school. I'd say it was very early on, probably first or second grade, I'd have to guess. And it was WCW, World Championship Wrestling, so it was not WWE. I was not allowed to watch that. But yeah, it was my dad who I believe just taped one of their live shows for me and showed it to me. I don't remember this first time, but I remember this specific VHS tape that he had taped that had like 4 or 5 matches on it. That was all I had to watch. And I'd watch like 6 to 7 years of just watching like these like 7 or 8 matches over and over and over again. But I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. And I knew how they ended. I knew all the spots. I could like choreograph the match myself, but I loved watching it. And it had Sting and Goldberg and Ric Flair, and Kevin Nash and DDP. I loved it. I loved watching it. My dad first showed it to me. So shout out to him for getting me on this train, because he actually, I think, watched wrestling when he was growing up too as a teenager. And I think he actually went to a couple of live shows. So if you didn't know that, you should ask him about it. And he actually, I believe, had a sign once that he held up to one of them. And I think the wrestler actually pointed at him or like called him out for it. So you should ask him for that story. But yeah, so for a while, that's all I had was just this one VHS tape. And then my parents would, they got me like the action figures, and there was this I guess it was like a plush figure / doll or whatever, that you actually, like, the kids were like meant to like wrestle with it. So I was always like making all these moves up and like having these matches in my bedroom, like on like the couch, like pulling all these like elbow drops and stuff on them. And they had a couple like pressure points where you push them and there were these audio cues, and it was so much fun. I just loved it. I can't honestly say why. I guess just because I don't know. It's just something about it that was entertaining to me, and I just loved it. And then I finally discovered Friday Night SmackDown, which was WWE, which is every Friday night at 8 p.m., and I started watching that in middle school, that and Sunday Night Heat, which is another one of their shows. I watched 2 of those shows because Friday nights, my parents usually had a small group meeting, or they would be with their friends upstairs. So I'd watch it downstairs in the basement, and they didn't know. And then Sunday nights as well, my parents were both at youth group at 8 p.m. when it would air, or maybe 7 p.m. But I'd be home alone, so I'd go downstairs in the basement and turn on Sunday Night Heat and get my fill of wrestling. And I loved it. And it was so great. And then it kind of just, kept going from there. And, I've had my times of where I've gone months or even years without watching it and then come back and watched it again. But, there's something about it that I find very entertaining. Like I said, it's just the storytelling behind it. It's not necessarily focusing on the actual action of it per se. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of the same thing of like one of my favorite movie series is Jason Bourne, the Bourne series. And I don't love those films because of how accurate his shot is with a gun, or how lethal and harmful his fighting skills are. I do it because I love them because of the story behind it and how, he has this amnesia and he's trying to figure out who he is. And he knows how to just like disable someone's firearm and like get them on the ground unconscious without even realizing what he's doing. Stuff like that. And, yes, I love action movies in general, so I love the action parts of them. But it's ultimately the story behind it, I think, drives a lot of the viewership, which is, for me, is the same as professional wrestling. I don't really know. That's kind of just something I've always been wanting to share with people. And now that I have started this podcast, I thought it'd be a good thing to talk about. I'd love to discuss this with you in person or over text or message, whatever. If you have thoughts, if you think I'm totally wrong and you still think it's stupid and you hate it, or you love it, or whatever, if you have any questions or you just want to talk about it, I'd love to talk. So hit me up if you have any of my contact info. Let me know what you think of the episode. Let me know what you think just of the quality. I finally got some soundproofing up in my apartment, so I finally have a permanent, kind of setup here finally. So hopefully I'll be, knocking out a few more podcasts than usual. I know it's been a while since I last posted, but yeah, let me know just even in general how the sound quality is. I should be editing this pretty well, so there shouldn't be any echo or anything. But and let me know just what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback. And thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next episode. Peace.